Hi, so some of you said you wanted a video about compensatory behaviours, so this is the video that I'm going to be doing, and actually it's one that's quite relevant for me as well, because compensatory behaviours is something I've struggled with a lot in the past, and I'm not perfect. I wouldn't say I'm recovered. I would say that I'm in recovery, and even now, although I've got a lot better in dealing with compensatory behaviours and not doing them so much, I still myself find myself doing them. So yeah, I think this would be a good video to share my how I've helped try and work on some of my compensatory behaviours, and hopefully you can like take some tips away from it. And also sharing experiences I think also really helps. I know for myself, I would mainly do compensatory behaviours if I've not been able to exercise like I would do normally, or if I'm anticipating eating more food, so I will compensate either, beforehand or the following day I would eat less. Likewise with the exercise, if I was not exercising as much, my compensatory behaviour would be to restrict my intake. And obviously everybody has their own things that would trigger their compensatory behaviours. They were kind of my main ones, and as I say, I've come a long way in not doing the compensatory behaviours much anymore, but there will be times when they are triggered and I find myself kind of doing them. But what's really helped me in working on my compensatory behaviours is that I recognise that I want to do them. And that might seem really stupid thing to say, but a few years ago, say I hadn't been able to do the exercise that I wanted to do, or I was thinking, oh, I'm going out for dinner, so I'm going to be eating more, so I must eat less during the day. That would have just been my thought. I would have thought, okay, I'm going to do less exercise, so I must eat less. It was just, that was my thought, so that's what I did. There was no kind of argument with that. It was, this is what I'm thinking, so this is what I'm going to do. Whereas now, if I still think like that, so if I think, I've not done the exercise today, so I should really eat less, I then can think, that is your eating disorder thought, you are thinking like that. And being able to separate that from my own thoughts really helps, because then I can start to rationalize it and argue with it, which I think then helps you to be able to not engage with the compensatory behavior. So that was kind of my first step, actually being able to recognize that it wasn't an automatic thought which has to result in an automatic action. It was actually being able to recognize that thought and then try not to act on it. And exercise is something I struggled with a lot with my eating disorder, particularly with walking. I would have to go out and walk for a certain amount of time every day. And when I started working on this with my therapist, I wanted to reduce the amount of walking, because I wanted walking to become something that I was in control of, that I would go and do if I chose to, not if I didn't want to. So when we started working on reducing the walking that I was doing, I did want to introduce compensatory behaviours. It was, oh, I've walked for 5 minutes less, so I need to have less calories. And my therapist was really good in that she said to kind of think of it as a test, as an experiment. You do the 5 minutes less walking and see how you want to react. She said it doesn't matter if you do the compensatory behaviours or you want to do them, but you have to be able to recognise that that's what you're doing. And then when you find that that's what you're doing, we can then work up with an action plan on how to deal with that. And when I did start reducing the walking, I did do the compensatory behaviours. I felt like I couldn't not. But then I went back to the therapist, said, yep, walking for 5 minutes less makes me want to do this. And I did this. So we then decided on what I could do to try and counteract those compensatory behaviours. So for me, what's really helped is knowing that, and I've said it a lot in my videos before, that anxiety doesn't increase forever. And when we want to engage in a compensatory behaviours, it's because we are feeling very stressed, very anxious, and like we can't cope with what we've just done or what's going to happen in like in the next meal, so we have to do a compensation to deal with that, which will lower our anxiety. But it is about remembering that anxiety doesn't increase forever, and if you can just sit with that anxiety without engaging in the compensatory behaviour, then that anxiety does eventually plateau and come down. It won't carry on going up and up and up. But when we're feeling the anxiety go up and we want to engage in the compensatory behaviour, if we then engage in that compensatory behaviour and our anxiety comes down, we will always then associate that reduction in anxiety with that compensatory behaviours. And the only way to break that is to sit with the anxiety, let it go up, let it plateau on its own, and let it come down. And then you realise that actually, you know, you can deal with it and you don't have to engage in the compensation behaviour. And that is partly what I did with the walking. So it was, you know, it was horrible to sit with that anxiety, you know, to do the 5 minutes less, to be desperately wanting to reduce my intake, feeling like I couldn't cope with the stress if I didn't do that. But then knowing that if I did that, if I did reduce my intake, then I'm always going to have to reduce my intake to reduce my anxiety. But if I break that cycle, I won't have to. And over time, you know, I sat with it, I let the anxiety do what it wanted to do, and, you know, it did come down. And gradually over time, my anxiety had come down and I didn't have to engage in the compensatory behaviour. So that was really, really helpful to me. And I know it's probably not necessarily very helpful for you, for me to just say, you know, you've just got to sit with it, ride out the anxiety and it will get better. Like, I know that that's so much easier said than done, but it is true. It is just a case of you have to feel really, really rubbish with that anxiety, but doing that will then make it so much better in the long run. And also for myself, I think with regards to compensatory behaviours, it's that I also try and think long term. So I think, you know, God, you know, I don't know, say I'm going out for dinner and I'm thinking, okay, I'll need to, you know, restrict beforehand. I'll then think, do you really, really want to spend the rest of your life, for when you ever go out for dinner, to have to restrict like during the daytime or whatever? Or if you've eaten more one day, do you really want to spend the rest of your life then thinking that for the next day you have to eat less? Like, that is not the life I want to be living. So I do try and like argue like that with myself and think long term, think, you know, this is not how I want to live my life, and the only way to not live your life like that is to challenge it, however hard that is. And, you know, it is, you know, do keep thinking about your goals, you know, write them down, think about the things that you want to be able to do, that you want to achieve, and then kind of think, well, argue with yourself how, if you engage in these behaviours, how it doesn't help you achieve those goals. You know, I find that helpful for me, you know, whatever my goals are, whatever the reasons are that I want to recover, actually engaging in those compensatory behaviours gets me further away from those goals, and it is just feeding the eating disorder. And the only way to the only way to break those compensations, the only way to, you know, get closer to your recovery goals, is to fight against the eating disorder and fight against those behaviours. And the thing is with compensatory behaviours is that they can be so little, but once they start, they really creep in and in and in. Like, you could like your compensatory behaviours, it could be that, you know, you've eaten a bit more, so you're going to walk for a minute more or something like that. Or, you know, you've done something, so you're going to reduce your intake by, you know, a really small number of calories or a really small amount. But the thing is, once it creeps in, it's like, well, I've done that this time, so I'll have to do that the next time. And then it becomes a gradual slope where you start slipping backwards, and once it's in, it's so hard to get it back out. And, you know, I know that from myself. When I found myself, say, missing a snack, once I've missed the snack, it's like, well, I've missed that snack now, so that snack's gone. Like, I'm not going to eat that again. And it's so much harder to get it back in. So yeah, you really need to be kind of vigilant and hard on yourself, because you can say to yourself, oh, you know, an extra minute of walking is not going to make any difference, or, you know, missing 50 calories is not going to make any difference, but it does. Everything is significant, and it's significant up here. And that's the thing, that's why you have to be so hard on yourself to not engage in the compensatory behaviours, and that you don't allow yourself any leeway with that in thinking that just a little bit won't matter. It's just a little bit to make yourself feel better, because it's that little bit to make yourself feel better that is strengthening the eating disorder, that's reinforcing the eating disorder. And actually, in the long term, what genuinely will make you feel better is when you can live a life which doesn't necessitate you feeling like you have to engage in compensatory behaviours. That is not the life we want to be living. So it is, you know, you do have to be strict on yourself, and you do have to be aware and know that anything, any little thing of compensation is just feeding the eating disorder. So yeah, my 3 top tips for trying to deal with tackling your compensatory behaviours would be to recognise that that's what you're wanting to do and that's what you're thinking, and to differentiate that thought from your own genuine thought. To remind yourself that anxiety doesn't increase forever and that you can deal with it, that you can deal with the anxiety. And thirdly, to again remind yourself of your long-term goals, of what you want your life, you know, to be like, that you don't want to be doing these compensatory behaviours forever and living like this forever. So I hope that's helped. As I say, you know, I've come a long way in not engaging in compensatory behaviours, but as I said, I'm not perfect. There are times when I will find myself doing it, but then I think it's, as I said, you recognise that you're doing it and you try and work on it. You know, recovery is not, no one's recovery is perfect, but hopefully you can take some tips away from this video, and I hope that it helps. Please like if you like it, subscribe if you want to subscribe, and thank you for watching.